Chairman Wu put out a statement that said Texas Democrats will issue demands for a second legislative session on Friday. I know you probably can't share specifics. What does your delegation want out of a second special session?
We want to make sure that the Hill Country folks that have suffered so much and lost children, everything, that they are prioritized. That was our ask from the very first session. And I know certainly that that is going to be our demand in going into this second session, is making sure that they are prioritized.
Is a quorum break on the table for a second legislative session, or are you committing to staying in Texas and fighting it the best you can from the chamber?
As of right now, our caucus feels confident in what we have been able to achieve and that we have achieved what we were hoping to achieve. Truly been a sacrifice for so many of our members who have sick children or family members back home, who have been, quite frankly, gone away from work because we literally just got out of our session just to jump into another special session and now be over here quorum breaking, and as well as bomb threats, threats to our lives, intimidation of our family members, hotlines being set up for vigilantes to essentially, produce us or give tips to our elected officials. Essentially, every day there's something else that's being lodged against us, or some type of rhetoric that's being directed at us, or threats, and or fines being levied on us. And so I can tell you certainly, this has not been an easy process for any of us. And so with that in mind, all of our members are trying to make sure that we continue to stay as united as possible, and being considerate of each other's sacrifices, as well as also consulting with our legal counsel, because there is also a legal process that we want to allow ourselves to avail ourselves to, that we have done in the past for other maps that the Texas legislature has passed and essentially been caught up in litigation and frequently found to be in violation of the Voting Rights Act. And so clearly, this particular map will be another one of those. So we do want to make sure that whatever it is that we do, as far as strategy wise, that we are giving also our legal counsel the optimal time frame that they need in order to bring this to the court system. So there's a whole bunch of different factors that we are considering and making sure that, as far as what the best path forward is. But I can tell you, as of right now, as a caucus, we feel very confident that at least what we were hoping to accomplish, which was the buy-in from other states to be able to dilute whatever Texas potentially could put out, was our number one priority. And also just making sure that the American people were aware of the power grab that Donald Trump was attempting to do in our state, because ultimately it was not going to be just our state. And we're seeing that right now. But we're happy that we have gotten here. We're glad that other states are now in the position to essentially take the baton whenever we're ready to pass it on to them. But we will not give up this fight. Whether we end up going back to Texas and we go on that House floor, we still have more tools in our toolbox that we have the ability to be able to do, and we will fight it until the very end.
Could you give me an example of one of those tools in your toolbox?
Sure, absolutely. So, in our legislature, we have things like point of orders, where you can kill a bill, or potentially an amendment that may get added to the bill. We could also potentially propose amendments to the bill as well. And so all of those things are things that we essentially have available to us whenever there is a particular bill of concern. We've done it in the past. This was the session that we just had was a brutal session that we utilized so much of those particular tools on issues that we felt would hurt Texans. And so this is obviously one of those situations as well.
If ultimately you do have to go back and you give a quorum and the most you can do is vote no against the maps, what do you hope the message would be after leaving the state? Because then it kind of just comes down to the fact that you delayed but didn't stop the process. So what's the message there if it's just ends up being a delay?
It would be naive to think that that somehow we were going to potentially stop the passing of the maps in Texas. Will we continue to keep fighting in ways that we can? What was most important to us was making sure that we got out and spread the word and had other states get in this fight with us, because ultimately, like I said, us as Democrats do not have the numbers in the Texas legislature. Of course, there's a lot of reasons for that, including gerrymandering districts as well within the state of Texas for House seats, as well as obviously voter turnout. But the most important thing was making sure that there was essentially people outside of Texas that were also involved in part of this process. We've been able to accomplish that. We had our press conference with some of our colleagues from Indiana that are seeing the pressure just recently from Vice President J.D. Vance to go over there and pressure them to do mid-decade redistricting. So there is obviously, we have created enough of a PR machine and getting the word out to voters, to constituents all over the nation that we need to fight this. We can't allow it to just happen and not do anything about it. And so the fact that we see California now moving forward, my understanding is they should be revealing those maps on Friday, ultimately convening their legislature on Monday, to go ahead and start going, preparing essentially for their mid-decade redistricting with support from all of their folks, and putting it to the voters and allowing them to approve that. I do not believe that we would have seen this much traction and buy-in from other states if it wasn't for our efforts in stepping out and giving essentially people time to take a look at their and talk with their elected officials in their states to figure out if whether their states in fact could potentially override any potential districts that Texas could carve up to give to Donald Trump.
A judge in Adams County, Illinois, just this afternoon said the Illinois Circuit Court does not have the power to direct Illinois law enforcement officers to execute the civil warrants against you that were issued in Texas. So I know you're an attorney, so I'd love to get your reaction to that as a lawyer. But also, does that factor into your group's decision about how long to stay?
Us in the legal field have a saying that, you've been bench slapped by the court. And that was essentially what this court did to Ken Paxton, and letting him know that he was essentially stepping out of his lane and dictating to the courts and authorities here in this state to essentially do what he wants to do when we return to Texas. So we weren't surprised that they came down. We weren't necessarily aware that it was going to come down today. But I can tell you, amongst all of my colleagues, once we learned about it, we were not surprised, and we were happy to hear the news, and to deal another blow to our leadership, in just showing this is the type of leadership that we have in the state of Texas that we have to deal with. Individuals who essentially filing lawsuits that have no basis in law, wasting taxpayer money just so they can participate in political theater. Just in particular, our attorney general is currently running for office. And so he has been pulling all the tricks that he can, and essentially continuing to keep himself relevant.
Attorney General Paxton is seeking the arrest of Beto O'Rourke for fundraising for your group. When we spoke the other day, you said you plan to pay all fines and expenses yourself. So has O'Rourke's group, Powered by People, paid any of your delegation's expenses?
I have not received any particular funds from Beto, either individually or from anything affiliated with him. But like I said, the last time we spoke, I did tell you that, one of the considerations and things that we had taken, and discussed in anticipation that we might likely have to do this, was if whether we have the ability to take on those fines personally. And I do have the ability to do that. And so, yes, I personally will be covering my fines that are whatever it is that they end up ultimately being, because of course, not only do we get fined per day, but we also, depending on what resources were used to potentially find us, can also be levied against us as well.
And how about for things like hotels and meals and such?
I'll give you an example. Like we had a press conference today, and we have transportation that will transport us from where we're at to wherever it is that we're going to go. I'm not personally aware as far as other than obviously HDC is able to cover that. Our caucus has funds that we pay into it as due members individually, and so to what level that they're utilizing those particular monies for these efforts is most likely what they're doing. But I'm not personally aware of anything other than obviously outside of our HDC that's covering our expenses.